Being one of the most powerful land animals on the planet, grizzly bears are notoriously dangerous to run into in the wild, famous for being unpredictable and often showing no warning signs before an attack. Encounters with this animal can quickly become deadly. What makes an attack from a grizzly even more terrifying is the fact that they're known to begin eating their prey before they've died. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. In today's episode, we take a look at 3 of the most terrifying grizzly bear attacks ever. Welcome to Final Affliction. On June 21, 2021, 16-year-old Mikhail Garin was helping travelers explore the Ergaki National Park as a tour guide in the Cyan Mountains of Siberia. The area is a picturesque tourist resort with rocky mountains and high waterfalls. The summer is the only time of the year that the province is easily accessible for tourists to explore. Animals like the snow leopard, moose, wild boar, and wolves are some of the largest populations that inhabit this rough geography. But the most formidable of these predators is the infamous Russian grizzly bear. It is the largest bear species on the continent, at over 2.5 meters in length and standing more than 3 meters tall on its hind legs. Armed with a set of 42 teeth, including molars and razor-sharp front canines, it can tear through its victim's flesh and deliver crushing force to the bone in a single bite. Thousands of fatal bear attacks have been recorded in the last few decades, and most of them have resulted from humans venturing too close into bear territory. On that fateful day, at early in the morning, young Mikhail was making preparations for visits and exploration trips around the park for the group of travelers that had hired him as a helper and tour guide. He realized he was short on some important supplies for the camp and decided to make a quick trip to a nearby village downhill. It was 7 in the morning, and the sun had barely started to shine through the dense fog and clouds. The path to the village went through a forest cover that remained frozen for most of the year. The young boy picked up his backpack and set afoot downhill to the village, hoping to make it back in time. The cold morning fog had silenced the crunch of the leaves that littered the forest floor. He had seldom been up so early and had just started his new job as a tour guide at the park. Mikhail walked among the tall forest trees, with only the occasional chirping bird that disturbed the dead silence. After just a few minutes of walking, he heard a muffled grunt in the distance that perked up his ears. He was aware of the danger of animal attacks in the area, but had never encountered one. The boy looked back, trying to pierce through the morning fog to see into the distance, but there was nothing there. He quickened his pace and walked straight ahead, and he dismissed anything he heard as the odd deer or elk that would sometimes graze the forest. He then heard the grunt again, this time much closer behind him. It was followed by the sound of footsteps approaching in the distance. The little boy glanced back, and what he saw froze him still in terror. A giant mass of brown fur peeked at him from among the woods. The feared grizzly bear stood less than 10 feet away from the frail young boy, with its eyes locked straight on him. Mikhail stood there, unsure of the next move to make. He had studied wildlife brochures about the area and knew that running was the greatest mistake he could make in that moment. There was no one to call out to for help. It was just the massive bear and the little boy, surrounded by miles of forest on every side. Mikhail's heartbeat raced, as every step back he took was matched by a step forward of the bear. In desperation, he looked up at the trees in hopes of climbing into safety, but the branches provided no support to pull himself up. The bear realized how vulnerable the boy was and lunged straight at him with all its might. Grizzly bears can stand on their 2 hind legs and like to swiftly kill their victims with a massive stomp on the neck to immobilize its prey before feasting on it. The bear leapt at Mikhail from the distance, pinning him beneath its legs. The little boy screamed in pain with the massive weight of the bear atop his fragile body. The predator growled at him and took aim for the neck, plunging its front canines deep into his flesh. Mikhail could offer no resistance and breathed his last in just a few short minutes. The animal dragged him deep into the woods, and cut open his torso to devour his insides. Several hours had passed, and the tourists back at the camp were left wondering where the young boy had gone. Despite searching and calling out his name, Mikhail was nowhere to be found. The camp settlement was close to the opening of the forest, and they ventured into it trying to find him. Just a few minutes later, they discovered something that confirmed the brutal tragedy that had taken place. It was the half-eaten corpse of the young boy, identified by his shirt, lying beside the trees in the distance. Horrified at the gruesome nature of his death, they stumbled forward trying to assess what had actually happened. It was only a few moments later that they noticed the grizzly bear among the woods guarding its kill. The tourists now found themselves in the same predicament as the young boy, but didn't know what to do. In desperation, one of the tourists ran back to his camp, prompting the bear to chase after him. But the man was armed with a small pocket knife, which he used to take several jabs at the animal's neck as it leapt onto him. The small knife was no match for the sheer size of the bear, and was only enough to momentarily throw it off. The animal walked away and sat down near Mikhail's half-eaten body, giving the tourists just enough time to escape and run back to their camp. The men went and alerted authorities at the Ergaki National Park, detailing the death of their tour guide and their harrowing ordeal they just went through. Several park rangers and sharpshooters spread into the forest in an attempt to locate and tranquilize the man-eating bear. The park was immediately closed, and everyone working was called back to safety. By the time the men made it to the site where they found Mikhail's body, they found the bear still lying beside him on the forest floor. The park rangers, assuming that the bear was dead from the knife wounds, approached the animal to carry it away, but as the rangers went close enough to reach, it got up and lunged at the men. Fortunately, the ranger was armed with a rifle, loaded and aimed at the bear, and fired several shots as it jumped at him. The bear was finally dead, with over 7 bullets to the head and chest. The tourists looked at the body of the young boy, which resembled a mauled carcass, and realized how lucky they were to have escaped the attack with just a few cuts and bruises. The attack was the result of a series of coincidences that ended in the brutal demise of the young boy. The prolonged freezing winters had forced the grizzly bears to descend and populate the forests closer to human settlements in search of food. That eventually led to crossing paths with humans more often, resulting in an erosion of fear and greater proclivity to see humans as prey. Climate change had also been depleting their natural diet and disturbing the natural food chain of their habitat. On that fateful day, the final nail in the coffin for Mikhail was his decision to take a shortcut to the village through the forest instead of the path circumventing the forest carved out by the park authorities. The news spread like wildfire and prompted action to retreat human settlements further away from bear territory in order to avoid another fatal attack. But 16-year-old Mikhail wasn't so lucky, and his half-eaten and almost unrecognizable body was scooped up and buried at a graveyard nearby. His family was left devastated at the loss of their son, who had gone out to earn a livelihood and support them at such a young age, but tragically instead met his untimely final affliction. Karma is a crazy concept, but one that is widely believed to keep the natural balance. It is the idea that if you do good things, then good things will come to you. Likewise with doing bad things. We like to think that if we are good people, then we will be saved from negative energies around us, as it should only be reserved for those who intentionally commit bad behaviors. But what if this isn't the way the world works? What if every action is simply random and has no consequences on the outcome of a situation? These ramblings are probably close to what Wes Perkins was thinking in May of 2011, as a large grizzly bear ripped his face off in between his screams for help. Alaska's Seward Peninsula is on many people's bucket lists, with beautiful glacier hikes, the historic Iditarod Trail, and even the opportunity for whale watching activities. Despite its appeal, Visitors need to be constantly aware of their surroundings, as there are countless dangers in this icy wilderness. With most Arctic environments, the grizzly bear is able to thrive with its thick fur and expert hunting ability, which, in an area with an incredible diversity of fish and fauna, the grizzly bear is clearly the top predator. Despite this, these bears are particularly vulnerable in the spring as they are just emerging from hibernation. These animals will usually be in quite poor shape as they haven't eaten for months and might even have newborn young with them. They are weaker than usual and so are easier prey for humans. People have realized this, and so there is an annual tradition of spring bear hunts. This is where Wes Perkins becomes involved. In May 2011, Wes and two hunting buddies, Dan and Edward Stang, arrived in Seward Peninsula ready to hunt some bears together. They were avid outdoorsmen and regularly organized trips together to escape from the noise of their towns. A few days into their trip, they found the tracks of a large male bear and began to follow them into the snow using their snowmobiles. They could tell from the paw prints that this animal was an incredible size and would be the talk of the town if they were able to hunt and kill it. Suddenly, the tracks disappeared. Wes got off of the vehicle and searched the ground for any sign of the bear. Little did he know, the bear was watching him from 70 feet away and was just waiting for the perfect moment to strike, the moment that the hunter would become the hunted. The bear suddenly pounced, launching himself through the trees and straight towards Wes. Hearing the rustle behind him, Wes turned and was horrified to see the huge male bear rushing towards him with murder in his eyes. He tried to grab for his rifle, for anything that he could use in defense, but the bear was too fast. Instead of the weak and vulnerable bears they were expecting, this animal was in the prime of his health and ravenous from a long hibernation, about hungry enough to eat a human if he could get his paws on one. He knocked Wes to the ground as his massive frame smashed into him at 50 kilometers per hour and, in one swift movement, grabbed onto Wes's face. His head was dwarfed in comparison to this massive predator, and as he stared at the rows of teeth in front of his eyes, he knew that his chance of survival was very low from this point onwards. Almost immediately, the bear began to shake Wes like a dog would with a new toy, using all of his skills to try and kill his prey. As he shook, his teeth sank deeper into Wes's face, and he could hear his own skull cracking under the pressure that this animal was able to put him under. He bit more and more, harder and harder, trying to completely break his skull and end the whole ordeal. He forced his body into the ground and began to claw away at his body in an attempt to shred him into pieces. Wes felt that he didn't have long left. His pain was fading away and replaced with adrenaline that he knew he had no energy to even use. Pieces of skin and bone were being flung from his body as the animal viciously tried to kill him. When his two friends finally arrived to the scene and saw the horrific scene, not knowing if he was alive or not, they shot the bear quickly and from a safe distance. The bear let go of Wes while letting out a growl of pain before running into the safety of the forest. Once the men were sure that the bear had fled, they immediately attended to their friend, but they were horrified by what they saw. Wes's bone structure in his face was completely destroyed, with a terrifying array of bite marks and missing bone fragments strewn across his whole body. He was completely unrecognizable, and the majority of his face was hanging by loose strands of skin. He was missing his nose, his jaw had been ripped from his face, and, at this point, he was completely blind, clawing at his airways in an attempt to breathe. The father and son began to try and save his life, knowing that they would only have a short amount of time before Wes would become unresponsive, either from passing out from the pain or succumbing to his injuries. They questioned him to try and find out any information from the attack that may help him, but with no jaw, he was finding it impossible to respond to anything. He began to use hand signals instead, the only way that Wes would be able to communicate for a very long time after the attack. They radioed to Nome, the nearest town, informing the rangers of the situation and begging them for help. After hearing about the intensity of the attack and the condition of Wes, helicopters were dispatched in minutes, flying to the scene in an attempt to save Wes while they had the chance. While they were waiting, Wes drifted in and out of consciousness as the blood loss from the attack began to take effect. Once he was recovered into the rescue helicopter, he was immediately flown to Harborview Hospital, where he immediately was placed into a coma. He spent 5 days in this coma and underwent 26 life-saving surgeries, totaling over $1 million in medical bills. His face was completely reconstructed with titanium, replaced parts of his jaw where the bear had ripped it clean off, and he was unable to speak or eat independently for many months to come. He was unable to eat any solid food, so everything had to be fed to him from a blender, and his sight was barely salvageable, reduced to only light and dark. He was left with just half a tongue, something that the doctors were not able to rectify. And while he is now able to talk, it's heartbreaking for a man who loved to talk as much as he did, having to suffer these life-changing disabilities. Once he was finally released from hospital, many months later, he then struggled with a methadone addiction due to the high pain that his injuries caused. He was unable to live life without the help of this drug, dulling the pain for hours on end, just for it to return with the same brutality as the day the attack happened. Luckily, with the support of his friends, family, and medical professionals, Wes was able to recover once again. The recovery process was long, painstakingly long, and there were times when Wes believed it would be easier to just die and escape the pain and horror of his ordeal. But he lived on. Despite the ferocity of the bear, the remoteness of the scene, and the horrific injuries that he sustained, Wes Perkins survived one of the worst bear attacks in history. Despite his ordeal, he says that he has no ill feelings towards bears, stating that they are neither good or bad, just wild animals, and people need to be careful around them. Wild animals will behave like wild animals. They are unpredictable and dangerous, but as long as you stay aware of your surroundings, then you should be able to survive. He is no longer able to hunt as he once did, but states that those who can should stay alert to stay alive and avoid the same fate as his own, having your face savagely bitten off by a bear and possibly meeting your final affliction. Covering nearly 600 acres of land, the Apshawa Preserve is one of the largest nature reserves in New Jersey and is under 50 miles from New York City. It's a popular escape for those hoping to leave the bustle of the city for a more relaxing atmosphere. The protection of the New Jersey Conservation Foundation has allowed the area to flourish with oak and maple trees, along with a great diversity of animal and bird species. One of the largest inhabitants of this reserve is the black bear, and their numbers are on the rise as their numbers creep towards 2,500 individuals. These bears are considerably smaller and less aggressive than their brown cousins and are less likely to cause a conflict and will usually stay within their own territory. Unfortunately, as their habitat has slowly increased in popularity as a hiking destination, more and more people have entered their habitat with little to no awareness of the danger they are putting themselves in. Darsh Patel was a 22-year-old student who was studying technology and informatics at Rutgers University. On September 21, 2014, Darsh and 4 friends decided to go hiking on the Apshawa Preserve. They had all individually visited the preserve in the past and were avid nature enthusiasts, so they were all pretty confident in their own abilities. After packing their bags full of their essentials, they set off the next day using various park and trail maps. They began hiking at 8 a.m. that morning and traveled along the first loop of the trail, taking photos with their cell phones of their surroundings and any animals that they encountered along the way. They were able to capture some images of the deer that grazed in the nearby fields, safe in the knowledge that the deer fences would keep anything off of their paths. They were mistaken. There were some unprotected areas, and certain predators knew exactly how to take advantage of these weak spots. As the group was finishing the first loop, one of the boys suddenly shouted out that he could see a large black bear creeping the ledge in the distance. Excitedly, they all turned to the ledge that he was pointing at, but they couldn't see anything. As the bear had already run off, someone suggested that they should go back to the ledge to try and get a closer look at the animal, but the others decided that it wouldn't be smart to risk getting close to a bear that they could no longer see. It could be anywhere, after all. Instead, they continued to hike further down the trail, keeping an eye out for another possible bear sighting and hoping that this time they'd be able to capture the animal within their camera lens. As the track became a little more unkept, the group were forced to enter the unfenced areas of the park. Excited about the potential of capturing a bear on camera up close, they entered the fields in the unfenced part of the park. They were taken aback by how stunning the sights were, marveling at the beauty of the Butler Reservoir and the rolling green landscape around them. After walking for 7 hours, they decided to take a short break. They reassessed their plan and decided to continue to the connector loop, which was mostly unfenced. They climbed up a ledge to eat their snacks of granola bars while they rested for about half an hour before continuing their hike. Suddenly, Darsh spotted the black bear that his friend had seen earlier, only this time it was much closer and staring straight at him. Darsh froze and stared back at the 300-pound bear as it looked him up and down. Excitedly, he began to slowly raise his camera to capture the image of the animal only 100 yards away. Instead of being worried he'd be attacked, he was instead concerned about missing out on a photo. He was convinced that the animal would be scared of him, giving him the advantage. Darsh's friends spotted the bear as well, but they started to realize that the bear was slowly creeping towards them, seemingly beginning its hunt. The boys became worried and wanted to leave, knowing that they wouldn't stand a chance. But Darsh remained in front of the bear, taking more and more pictures. His friends began to warn him that the bear was now stalking him, but he was too engrossed in his photography to notice or care. Suddenly, the bear began to pick up speed and quickly closed the 100-yard gap between itself and the boy, growling as it ran. All the boys ran away at the sight of this massive animal running at them, all except Darsh. He continued taking pictures, photographing the bear as it got closer and closer to him, and his friends screamed at him to leave and run with them. He was too engrossed in his photos to fully understand what was happening, until it was all too late. He finally realized that the bear was only 15 yards away and panicked. He turned on his heel and tried to run away at the last minute, but the bear was still behind him, running faster and faster. The boys separated and ran down different paths, hoping to confuse the bear so that it would stop pursuing them. It worked for a second, and the bear stopped in its tracks, wondering who to follow. But its eyes quickly caught sight of Darsh again, who was the farthest behind the group. Darsh had gained some significant distance from the bear while it stopped running, when suddenly the worst happened. He tripped on a rock and twisted his ankle while looking over his shoulder at the bear. He screamed in fear as he watched the bear continue its charge at him, knowing he had no chance of escape this time. The bear immediately closed the gap and pounced on Darsh, tearing into his body with his huge jaws. It bit down hard on his body, ripping skin and muscle from his face, torso, and arms. It grabbed him by the legs and began to drag him across the floor as blood began to saturate the dirt beneath him. The animal ferociously chewed into his body, leaving numerous cuts and bites all over him, trying to pull his limbs out of his body. He screamed in agony and called for his friends, but there was nothing they could do. They hadn't brought any bear spray, and playing dead was no longer an option, as he was soon to be dead anyways. He tried to push the bear off of him, but he stood no chance. The bear was too strong. Covered in dirt and his own blood, Darsh Patel died alone in the woods. The rest of the group were still running, scared out of their minds as they'd heard the anguished screams of their friend behind them. They were fairly certain that the bear had killed Darsh, but they didn't know if the bear would still continue after them once it was done. Once they had gotten far enough away and couldn't hear the crunching of an approaching bear, they phoned for the police to report Darsh as missing.
911, where's your emergency?
Hey, hello. I'm on Macoupin Road. It's 81 Macoupin Road. I believe I'm in West Milford or somewhere around there. We were hiking and we saw a bear, and we all started running, and it started chasing us. two of us are okay. One other person answered, but two are really close, and I'm scared out of my mind for them. I want to go back, but I'm hurt, and I don't know what to do.
You're hurt, you said?
Like, not badly. I just scraped my leg. It's nothing major, but I'm more worried about them. Can anyone get here anytime really soon, please?
Are you on a trail?
Yeah, we were on the trail.
Well, it's going to take them a while to get anywhere near you if you're on a trail.
A search party was quickly organized by West Milford police to find the young man, and they combed the area for 2 hours straight. Finally, they found the brutalized remains of Darsh Patel's body. It was hardly recognizable and completely covered in blood, body parts strewn across the trail. As the search team were observing the mess of the body before them, they suddenly heard rustling behind them as the bear emerged from the bushes. It was coming to collect its meal once again. Startled by the number of people in front of its food, it began to get aggressive with the men present, who were trying to shoo it away. The search team's shouts at the bear only further enraged the animal. Finally, for the safety of everyone and to avenge the young college student, they shot and killed the ferocious beast, ending its reign of terror. They collected Darsh's body and returned it to the family, leaving them to grieve for their son who had died too soon. It was declared that the group had done nothing wrong and that the attack was unprovoked, but they believed that the attack may have happened because the animal was extremely hungry. Smelling the boys' granola snacks on the ledge, it began to approach them to get the food from them, ultimately killing Darsh in the process. Running also would have activated the animal's natural predatory instincts, which triggered it to chase the group. Ultimately, it was an unfortunate accident that resulted in the death of a young man with a bright future. After analyzing the bear, shreds of Darsh's clothes as well as his skin and blood was found inside the bear's stomach. Darsh's phone was also found near his body with bite marks on it. When police looked inside his phone, they found his terrifying final photos before death. This was Darsh's final photograph he took before being fatally mauled. The bear is seen running towards him at less than 20 feet away. It was shortly after this moment when Darsh Patel realized the seriousness of the situation. It was at this moment he decided to run. Less than 5 minutes later, he met his horrifying final affliction.